Ja, wir sind wieder zurück. Wir haben Stefano Scoglio bei uns. Er ist also quasi Wissenschaftsjournalist, Forscher im wissenschaftlichen Bereich. Herr Scoglio, wir sprechen jetzt mit ihm auf Englisch.
Yeah, we're going to speak English.
Mr. Scoglio, can you hear us?
Hi.
Hello. Nice that you can be with us today. We just spoke to Professor Kämmerer about the PCR-Tests, which has a lot of question marks surrounding it. And now we would like to get a little bit more into detail. You had a question that was very interesting, the connection between the flu.
Yeah, that was one of the viewers. I started to ask you about this before we we're live again. One of the viewers is asking that you know a lot about the correlation between flu vaccination and interstitial pneumonia. I think I remember, even though I'm just a lawyer, but I do remember some of the medical things that we have learned from some of your colleagues whom we questioned a couple of months ago when they were trying to explain what happened in Bergamo. And if I'm not completely mistaken, they said the fact, of course, the basic fact that many people who were indeed sick, probably with the flu or something, were transferred from the hospitals to the nursing homes. That was a bad mistake, of course, because many people in the nursing homes are older and their immune systems in some cases were already damaged. Therefore, that was a bad mistake and it probably caused many deaths. But they also pointed to something to another fact, which is the fact that there was a flu vaccination shortly before this happened. Is there really a correlation?
Well, yeah, there is a correlation, and the correlation is even wider, and I will try to explain why. There is a correlation for sure because what happened in Bergamo and Brescia, the two towns, the two cities that were hit with the highest number of deaths, few months before COVID appeared, they had 2 cases of meningitis. Mm-hmm. So they started doing this huge promotion of both vaccinations, flu vaccination and meningococcus vaccination. Mm-hmm. And they did them both. So what it is known is the fact that they did about, in those 2 provinces, 185,000 flu vaccinations, mm-hmm. and about 80,000 meningococcus vaccinations at the same time. Usually, these are done mostly to older people. Uh-huh. So this certainly could be a factor that explain why there were so many more deaths. But I think this is only part of the problem, because the real problem is that, there is a whole a branch of scientific literature which hasn't been mentioned at all so far, and I think is absolutely essential, because there's thousands of studies showing that the most relevant drugs, the most common drugs that are used, especially in advanced stage, like ACE inhibitors or digestive drugs or chemotherapeutic drugs or cardiovascular drugs, they're all proven to produce exactly the same symptoms as COVID. Really? In other words, yes, yeah. There's a specific branch of literature which actually connects the use of most normal drugs to pneumonia, uh-huh. and various types of pneumonia and even interstitial pneumonia. Mm-hmm. I'm available to send you all the information on that. So what is interesting in this is that I have an interview which was published in a journal, which is L'Avvenire, an Italian journal, to some doctors after COVID exploded in Bergamo. And these doctors said, well, it's very strange because we actually had people dying. A lot of my patients were dying already in October and November before COVID arrived. And it's written actually in the interview. And they said, And you know what is strange? The strangest thing is that they were all vaccinated. First, the doctors said it, as I say, it's strange because they were vaccinated, so they shouldn't have had these symptoms. But in reality, that's where the connection is. So I think that there's a lot to be said about the iatrogenic foundation of whatever happened in Bergamo and Brescia. Whatever. The next point is, of course, the fact not just that they were moved into, the old RSA or whatever it's called, old age residences, and is the fact of the World Health Organization protocol for treating these interstitial pneumonia and COVID, which is, of course, and I'm saying something that you all know, but these ventilators and high pressure oxygen pushed into these people who just had probably a slight breathing difficulty. And as I said before, it came out that it's not interstitial pneumonia, but it's like thromboembolic pneumonia, which means your lungs vases are blocked. So the example I usually use is, if you take like a water tube, right, and you close it on one side and you start pushing water high pressure, what's going to happen? Of course, it's going to explode, the tube, right? So when you put all these things together, you can explain why there's been a higher number of deaths in that area, because the reality is that if you look at statistics in Italy, but in Europe, there hasn't been any increase in deaths. In fact, there's been less deaths this year than last year. This is now certified. But we have a few situations like Bergamo, where they actually had a few thousand deaths more than the year before. And this, I think, is related to what I said before, a lot of iatrogenic causes, huge levels of vaccinations, and wrong therapies. And also one other thing which I underlined and hasn't been taken into account, and that is the fact that in Italy this year, winter arrived in March. Mm-hmm. We had January and February, which were like spring. Mm-hmm. Okay, and all the winter weather arrived in March, which again is another thing that would explain why you have more people with flu-like symptoms or respiratory symptoms, which then were brought into hospitals and were treated wrongly, with the consequence of so many more deaths. Mm-hmm.
Let me quickly translate, because there are some of our viewers who only speak German. Eine unserer Kolleginnen, kann ich sagen, hat mich gebeten, Professor Scoglio wegen des Zusammenhangs von interstitieller Lungenentzündung und Impfungen zu fragen. Und Professor Scoglio hat in diesem Zusammenhang gesagt, ja, da gibt es was. Die Grippeimpfung, aber auch, was war die andere Art der Impfung? Also ich glaube, Meningitis-Impfung haben, glaube ich, wie heißt dieser Sturm ausgelöst? Zytokinsturm ausgelöst. Und das hat wohl bei einigen Leuten das, was Sie, Herr Wodarg, auch schon mal angemerkt haben, diese besondere Form der Lungenentzündung ausgelöst, die aber eben nicht mit der normalen Lungenentzündung vergleichbar ist, sondern, das hatten, glaube ich, Notfallärzte aus New York auch berichtet, diese Leute machten den Eindruck, als seien sie in 10.000 Meter Höhe, 30.000 Fuß Höhe im Flugzeug, als sei da ein Druckabfall passiert, oder?
Noch wieder was anderes.
Ah ja.
Ja. Aber die interstitielle Pneumonie, die ist ja nicht typisch für Covid-19, sondern die gibt es bei allen Viruspneumonien. Mhm. Sie haben also unterschiedlichste Pneumonieerreger, virale Erreger von Pneumonien. Und das ist ja immer ein Zeichen dann nicht, dass das Virus die Lungenzellen so kaputt macht, sondern das ist ein Zeichen der Reaktion des Immunsystems. Das heißt, wenn man diese Verschattung in der Lunge sieht, diese interstitielle Pneumonie, dann reagiert praktisch das Lungengewebe auf ein neues Antigen, auf ein Virus eben in dem Fall. Und das kann, wie das Lungengewebe reagiert, das kann davon abhängen, welche Medikamente eingenommen worden sind, welche anderen immunologischen Veränderungen da sind, ob irgendwelche Immuntherapie da war oder ob schon eine Sensibilisierung oder eine falsche Sensibilisierung, ob das Immunsystem irritiert wurde durch andere Prozesse, die vorher gelaufen sind. Und das kann sehr wohl eine Impfung gewesen sein. Aber das ist nicht typisch für Covid-19, sondern das findet man auch genauso bei Influenza, das findet man bei anderen viralen Pneumonien, findet man sowohl ein ähnliches Röntgenbild als auch ähnliche Komplikationen.
Also diese interstitielle Lungenentzündung ist nicht typisch, das habe ich nicht verstanden, ist nicht typisch für Covid-19, sondern ist...
Nein, das ist eine Immunreaktion auf eine Viruserkrankung, die man auch bei anderen Viren findet, nicht nur bei Covid-19. Okay. Und wenn wir jetzt diese Menschen in den Krankenhäusern haben und nur nach Covid-19 gucken, dann sind wir auf einem Auge blind. Dann gucken wir nicht gleichzeitig, ob sie nicht vielleicht Läuse und Flöhe haben. Die können natürlich auch gleichzeitig noch Influenza haben oder andere virale Erreger, die gleiche Symptomatik machen, aber die werden derzeit oder wurden nicht untersucht. Man war völlig fixiert auf SARS-CoV-2-Viren und hat dann mit dem PCR-Test versucht, das Ganze zu erklären. Und das ist eben unzureichend, sondern dann muss man eine breite Analyse machen, welche Viren sind noch da. Wir wissen, dass in 50% der solcher Pneumonien, Viruspneumonien etwa, dass dort auch nicht nur ein Virus, sondern mindestens 2, manchmal sogar mehr Viren beteiligt sind. Und welches dieser Viren dann diese Reaktionen auslöst, das kann man dann, das muss man sehr viel komplexer untersuchen. Das kann man nicht so einfach sagen.
Okay. Zurück. Professor Scoglio, sorry about the interruption. We just needed the time to translate. But I don't want to simply go ahead and ask questions. I would like to let you explain your view of the situation as well. So what is your take? What do you think is happening right now?
Well, in a way, nothing's happening. In other words, nothing really has changed from the previous years. The example I make is, they say that we have like 1 million deaths for COVID in the world, 1 million and something, right? Now, apart from the fact that, of course, all this is very questionable in the sense that both the American CDC and the Italian Istituto Superiore di Sanità have acknowledged that 95% of these deaths are for people who are above 80 of age with 3, 2, or 1 serious, potentially fatal pathologies, right? So it's very difficult to attribute to COVID as such anything really independent. But apart from that, even if we assume that there's been 1 million deaths, let's say it's all due to COVID, well, every year in the world there are people dying of pneumonia or respiratory diseases are 7 million. So what are we talking about? Are we talking about 15% of the deaths that you normally have every year? There hasn't been any increase in mortality. The Euromomo, the agency that checks for mortality in Europe, published a report and a graphic in July 31st, showing that from January 1st to July 30th, all over Europe, there hasn't been any death increase, completely the same. So essentially what happened is that somebody decided for reasons that have nothing to do with health to call some of these deaths COVID-19, make a big fuss about it, talk all over the TVs for 24 hours a day, showing, the dead people being transported and so on, so creating panic in the population. And that's what's happened, because from a health point of view, nothing is happening. The other thing is, personally, I'm pretty radical in the approach to the virus, in the sense that, I don't have any prejudicial position. If you tell me that this type of pneumonia, which, as I said, is being connected, there's a huge literature showing that it's connected to vaccines, but also to most drugs, right? If you tell me this pneumonia is not due to these problems or to pollution or whatever, but it's due to a virus, then you're bound to prove that the virus is creating the disease, right? And so we're going back to the Koch postulates, which, apart from the fact that they're Koch postulates, they're common sense postulates. I mean, if you want to tell me that there's a microorganism that is the cause of a disease, you have to take the microorganism from a sick person, isolate it, put it in a culture, grow it, inject it or into an animal, guinea pig, and see if the same symptoms are reproduced of the original disease. Then you can say, yes, there is such a correlation between this microorganism and the disease. Has this been done for coronavirus? No, hasn't been done. They say that they've done it, but if you go and read the articles, it hasn't been done. The first article that was published by the Wuhan scientific equipe of the CCDC, the Chinese CDC, the equipe of Professor Tan, and the article is by Zhu and others, where they say that they isolated the virus. They use the same methodology that has been used for all the other studies that have claimed to isolate the virus. And this methodology is the following, the way I described it in my articles. They take a liquid from a throat or of a patient. They pick up about 150 microliters of it. Then they pass it through a machine, a device, which in their case was it's called ultra high pure virus RNA and so forth, right? To separate whatever is in the liquid from the presumably virus RNA. The reality is that when you go and look at the technical sheet of the device they use, it says that the device separates and takes all the nucleic acids, both RNA and DNA, right? All that they are there, the all of the nucleic acids. Now, I made a small calculation according to human physiology, what is known today, and in that 150 microliters, you should have about 30 billion nucleic acids. Human, bacterial, possibly viral, 30 billion. So that liquid with 30 billion nucleic acids, for them is the virus isolated. Mm-hmm. And this is the same methodology that has been used with all the rest of the studies, all of them. I mean, I've read the isolation from Italy also because after I say this, people keep sending me studies, right, from all over the world. They're all use the same methodology because they have no other methodologies as of today. So, and then after they do that, and they say this is the isolated virus, they do a PCR. With the PCR, they try to identify the RNA that belongs to the virus, right? But the problem is, as I said, I quoted a passage from a very interesting article, which is not from virologists, but from researchers in the field of extracellular vesicles and exosomes, which is a parallel area of research. And they say very clearly, they say, when you have a new microorganism that you don't know, going to look for it in this 30 billion nucleic acids matrix is like going to look for a pin in a high stay. Okay? It's actually what they write. Okay? So in a published article. So they throw this genomic sequence, which is, how do you know is the genomic sequence of the virus that you don't know, if you don't know the virus, right? So you have to guess. So you take like something that resembles maybe SARS-CoV-1 with a slight difference, and you throw it into this liquid, seeing to see if it attaches to something. And it will attach to something. But how do you know it's the virus you're looking for and not something else? There are studies that prove that up to 99% of these nucleic acids that you extract when you do the swab, up to 99% is human DNA. It's human. So could be extracellular vesicle, could be exosome, could be whatever it is. So essentially, they haven't isolated anything. Now, there is the next step, though. The virus hasn't been isolated. And this, of course, is a very, very big problem for not only for the eventual vaccine, because what are you vaccinating against if you don't know what is the virus? But also for the PCR, because the PCR doesn't have any gold standard, so-called any marker, to go look for what is it looking for if you don't know what you're looking for, essentially, right? But having said that, there's another step which is very interesting, and that concerns the pathogenicity, right? Because another Chinese equipe took the supposedly isolated virus of the TAN group of the study that I mentioned before from Zhu and others, and they took that and they tested it on mice to see how it would recreate the same symptoms, right? And actually, in the study by Bauer and others, who has been published in Nature, so has been and this today used as the proof that the virus is pathogenic. This virus is pathogenic. They took this non-isolated virus and they tested it on mice. I say, okay, the virus hasn't been isolated, but that liquid from a sick person, right, who has concentrated the nucleic acid, if there is actually a virus there that's responsible for that disease, clearly will be present in that liquid, probably in bigger number, right, because the person is sick and so has developed a lot of it. So in a way, it's an interesting test anyway, the test of pathogenicity. You take that liquid from a sick person, and then they inject it into two groups of mice: the wild mice, meaning the natural mice, and the transgenic mice, a mice that was genetically modified to produce more enzymes ACE2, which is supposed to be the enzyme that promotes the entrance of the virus into the cell, right? So when they actually injected this liquid, this pathogenic liquid, this presumed isolate of the virus, which is not, into the mice, the effect on the wild mice, which is the most relevant thing, a normal healthy person in parallel, what was it? Zero, no effect. No effect at all. They had a very slight effect only on the mice that was genetically modified, but even there they had like the hair slightly more active, and the loss, an 8% loss in the first week of weight loss in the first week, which was then recovered. So essentially, no effect whatsoever. So even from the point of view of is whatever is there, is it pathogenic? No, it hasn't proved that it's pathogenic. So hasn't been isolated, is not pathogenic. What are we talking about? We're talking about something that it's not there.
Okay, hang on 1 second. I'm going to translate that too. Professor Scoglio sagt, dass er große Zweifel daran hat, dass bisher das Virus überhaupt korrekt isoliert worden ist. Aber er unterstellt mal, dass es vielleicht ja doch irgendwas isoliert worden ist und stellt dann fest, dass es einen Test gegeben hat, wo das, was da isoliert wurde, was immer es ist, einmal 2 Gruppen von verschiedenen Mäusen injiziert wurde, einmal ganz normalen wilden Mäusen mit, so das unterstelle ich jetzt mal, funktionierendem Immunsystem und einmal genetisch veränderten Mäusen. Bei den ganz normalen wild lebenden Mäusen hat das, was da injiziert wurde, also was eigentlich der Krankheitserreger sein sollte, gar keine Auswirkung gehabt. Offenbar hat das Immunsystem das alles abgewehrt. Und selbst die genetisch veränderten Mäuse haben nur ganz milde Symptome gezeigt. Oder habe ich da was jetzt vergessen bei der Schilderung? Ja? Herr Dr. Wodarg, habe ich das so richtig geschildert?
Ja.
Und, was sagen Sie?
Ich kann da nichts ergänzen.
Oh. So, Professor Scoglio, we're all in agreement. Dr. Wodarg agrees with you.
Great.
And
I actually heard some conferences of doctor, so I
yeah. And let me add another thing, because you're saying there's nothing going on. This is the same as always. There's no excess mortality. 95% of the alleged COVID deaths are above the median age, or they're way beyond their life expectancy. Plus, they had pre-existing conditions. Every year, well, there's so many people who die of all kinds of not pneumonia, but I think there's
pneumonia and respiratory diseases. Yeah,
respiratory diseases. Yeah. This year we have only 15%. Is that what you said?
Yeah, 1 million on 7 million. It's about 15%.
Yeah.
The COVID represent.
Okay. Also das mache ich auch noch mal kurz. Er sagt, es hat sich überhaupt gar nichts getan, sondern es hat selbst in Italien trotz dieser beiden Spikes in Brescia und Bergamo keine Excess Mortality gegeben, und da in Bergamo und Brescia waren diese Patienten allesamt weit jenseits der normalen Lebenserwartung und hatten pre-existing conditions, also wie heißt das, Vorerkrankungen, sodass die mit ziemlicher Sicherheit, so darf man das wohl verstehen, auch an einer ganz normalen Grippe verstorben wären, wenn sie im falschen Moment erwischt hätte. So, this is, by the way, the conclusion that we have come to after talking to all these experts, including some of your Italian colleagues, but also other colleagues from all over the world. What do you think is going on? Why is this pandemic, or why is this panic being induced? What's behind this? Do you have any idea?
Yes, I do, but here we're moving from science into politics.
Okay.
Yes, I do. I personally believe that there are two main reasons. There's quite a few, but two are very central. And one is related to the financial crisis. Mm-hmm. One thing that not many people have underlined is the fact that in 2019, all the people who were looking at the economic situation claimed that from any angle of economic approach you can think of, they say that within the first 6 months of 2020, there would be a financial crisis at least 10 times bigger than the one we had in 2007, 2008. Mm-hmm. Because if you go and look at the situation of 2007, 2008, you see that the five main banks, including Deutsche Bank, then had about 150 trillion debt, mm-hmm. which is about mostly derivatives, mm-hmm. Which is about twice as much as the world GDP. Mm-hmm. As of today, mm-hmm. as of 2019, that number has grown to above 1,200 trillion. Okay, so that means that banks were completely bankrupt, completely with no money, only debts. Mm-hmm. And if this thing had come out on the open, it would have been a complete disaster for the banks and for whoever handles and owns these banks, especially because there wasn't a friendly president like Obama, but a very unfriendly president like Trump, mm-hmm. for these powers. So I think what happened is with these pandemics, you have the situation where, okay, there is an economic crisis, but with two big differences. One is nobody's fault, because it's the virus. Yeah. What can you do?
So, yeah.
Nobody's fault. And the other thing is they're not banks, they're not the big banks or the big multinational paying, but are the small businesses, right? Small, medium businesses. And which is what, I've heard for 20 years that, small and medium businesses are bad for the economy from official economists, that they should die because they're inefficient and tax evaders and blah, blah, blah. So clearly there is also an interest in promoting that type of move toward, centralizing the economy. The other thing that happened after this, which goes along with what I'm saying, is the fact that for the first time in history, both the European Bank and the United and the FDA and the Fed, for the first time, decided politically was decided that they don't have any limit in printing money, and they've printed more money in the last 6 months than in the last 10 years. And this money, of course, hasn't gone to in my pocket or your pocket, has gone to the big banks who are replenishing their situation from the big debt in which they find. That's one economic main reason. The other main reason, I think, it's what we're seeing now, the elections of the American presidential elections, and the need for them, for the deep state, whatever you want to call it, to get rid of Trump, because he's a wild card that they cannot control. I'm not a Trumpist. I don't agree on some of the things he does, but certainly he's done a lot to undermine, what is called the deep state or the big financial system. I actually heard recently, I'm not completely sure about it, but that would really explain what's going on in a total way. That maybe you know more than me on this, but that apparently the Trump administration had started this new project, which is called the quantum financial system. And the quantum financial system is a new financial system based on kind of a blockchain technology, where you wouldn't need any more central banks. Everything would be put into horizontal. Everyone would have direct access to the money situation without any mediation. And sounds like a utopia, but whatever it could be, it certainly would be like the death of the current financial system.
That's why I'm saying we're discussing what's going on in the meantime. We're discussing what's going on two different levels. One is, as you pointed out, the scientific level, and we're going to keep concentrating on that level because that is the way to bring the people who are responsible to justice. Drosten, Wheeler, WHO, and maybe the people behind them as well. But the other question, of course, is it definitely comes up. Why is this happening? In whose interest is this? And one theory that is plausible is the financial explosion that was imminent needed an excuse. And it couldn't be that the politicians and the so-called self-appointed corporate elites made serious mistakes. Therefore, you needed an innocent excuse, and now we have Corona, which comes into play. Let me just quickly translate this. Ich habe nochmal gefragt, wenn Professor Scoglio doch der Meinung ist, dass hier gar nichts passiert ist. Der Meinung sind wir ja inzwischen auch alle, nach dem, was wir hier gehört haben, sondern dass hier einfach eine Pandemie dass eine normale Grippewelle, vielleicht mit ein bisschen mehr Corona-Anteil, das weiß man alles nicht so richtig, aber dass eine normale Grippewelle aufgeblasen wurde zu einer Panikmache, dass hier jetzt all die Dinge, die wir ja schon öfter diskutiert haben, eingesetzt werden, um die Bevölkerung unter Kontrolle zu halten. Zum Beispiel diese Maske, die Social Distancings, diese völlig irrationalen Gerichtsprozesse, weil 2 oder 3 Personen an einem Strand so eng zusammengestanden haben. Das braucht uns im Grunde nicht zu interessieren für das, was wir hier machen. Für die Rechtsstreite, die wir hier führen, braucht uns das nicht zu interessieren. Aber für das, was danach kommt, für die eigentliche Aufklärungsarbeit, die danach kommt, müssen wir das wissen. Und wir dürfen auch jetzt nicht ganz und gar uns sozusagen die Augen zuhalten, um das nicht sehen zu können. Wir können es nicht genau erkennen, aber es gibt was im Hintergrund eine Rolle spielt. Eine Theorie, die Professor Scoglio hat, ist, dass diese Plandemic, würde ich jetzt auch sagen, dazu dient, die Finanzkrise, die sowieso über uns hereingebrochen wäre, die aber nicht von Corona ausgelöst wurde, zu verschleiern, einen Innocent oder eine Entschuldigung dafür zu finden. Es gibt noch eine andere Theorie, die wir hier schon mal diskutiert haben. There is another theory that this is about the Great Reset. You've probably heard about this.
That's the next step, in other words.
And they may have these theories may have something in common, and that is the people who are behind them. So
yes, absolutely.
yeah, but we're going to probably need to look into this further, but the first step is the scientific one, and that's why we're concentrating on the medical aspects and of course on the legal aspects. Everything else will have to wait until later. We have to know there's something there, but we don't have to discuss it right now.
Right.
Okay. Und?
Ja. Wir können ja mal gerade, ich weiß nicht, ob wir nachher noch eine Frage haben. Hast du noch Fragen an Herrn?
Nee, im Moment nicht. Is there something else that you think we should be aware of?
I can tell you about the lawsuit
yes,
that we launched
Absolutely.
in Italy.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, on the swab tests, on the tamponi, which essentially is based on points that I developed, and then we turned it into a lawsuit. And essentially, it's based on 5 elements. One is the fact that, of course, what I already said, if the virus hasn't been isolated and there's no proof that has been isolated, whatever test, PCR test, doesn't have any gold standard to use. And so, essentially, by this, I'm saying that my personal conviction is that the swab test, the COVID swab test, is 100% unreliable. Okay?
That's what Dr. Jeroen, formerly of Pfizer, also says. He says
100%.
94%, probably more, is completely...
No. But for me, it just doesn't make any sense. It's meaningless. Okay. So it's 100% unreliable. Mm-hmm. Now, when we move to the next step, because, of course, the point is you have to discuss and accept a level of discussion that may claim that the virus is present, that and that therefore you can test it. And so when we move into that level, the other points that we underlined is the fact that there's now about 200 types of swab tests in Europe, circulating in Europe, and there's a document from the European Commission which has been confirmed then by the Italian Istituto Superiore di Sanità, which says that all these tests have not only not been validated, but not even evaluated. They can be put into the market only with a CE stamp, which is only a guarantee that it's not going to explode into your hands, essentially, right? And then they say explicitly, that essentially 99% of these tests do not explain or show the sequences they use in the swab test. So how can you close down complete societies, complete economies based on a test that hasn't been validated, evaluated, and you don't even know what's in there, and you allow it to be used regularly? That's the second. The third one, of course, is the fact that we've been bombarded by the idea that these viruses mutate very quickly, right? That's another ridiculous thing. There are almost 150,000 genetic sequences of this virus at the GZAID, okay, at the data bank of viruses. And so you should tell me which one of these 150,000 is the actual virus, right? And they say, oh, by the way, because it mutates. But if it mutates so rapidly, then explain to me why a test that was organized 3 months ago, how it can test me now, since the virus has clearly mutated. How can I use a genetic sequence developed in China when you tell me that the virus in Italy is different from the Chinese, and so forth? So that's another point that, a contradiction of the system. Then we get to the essence of it, and that is the PCR. Now, I have, interviews with the most important experts of PCR. There's manual of PCR. I found a study published by Istituto Superiore di Sanità in Italy where they all claim that above 35 cycles, whatever is produced is junk. Doesn't have any meaning, okay? Ideally, in fact, there is an important microbiologist in Italy. His name is Professor Clementi, who is the chief microbiologist of the San Raffaele Hospital of Milan, which is one of the top hospitals in Italy, that a few weeks ago in an interview very clearly said, we should consider any positive test reached with more than 30 cycles as automatically as negative, right?
You know, that is in fact what the Frankfurt Public Health Agency says. We disregard anything above 25 cycles.
Yeah, that exactly. But is it actually in place?
I don't think so. The thing is that most public health agencies here in Germany don't even get any information on how many cycles were used. They're an exception, and that's why they're saying we know that anything above 25 cycles is completely useless.
Exactly. But even if you take 30, or even if you take 35, I have found two certificates, one certificate and one declaration from a lab that does these tests. The certificate itself actually says, and that's interesting too, because they tested for 3 genes, right? The E genes, the N gene, and the RDRP gene. And they only found one positive, the N, right? And they said, well, positive, then therefore it's positive. But with underneath the warning, as the result has been obtained with more than 35 cycles, and they don't say how many, but more than 35 cycles, then we assume that the patient is positive but not infective. This is written. This is written in the certificate. And I say, why is this information not reported on TVs, right? Because you put it on the certificate, but it doesn't get to the people through the news, right?
So you would then make a difference between, just like Dr. Jeroen says, between a hot infection and a cold infection. If it's positive, it tests positive because there may be some virus material, but it may be dead. Yeah. It may not even replicate. And it's a hot infection only once the virus replicates, intrudes into the cells and replicates. That is probably the definition you would give it as well. Like
yes, except this is my second phase, my second position. In other words, for me, 1 cycle, 10 cycle, 30 cycle don't mean anything anyway, because to me there is no proof that there is a virus. So what are you looking for? Yeah. But if we accept the ground of discussing from a point of view that there is a virus, then I could accept that. Partial, because actually, Kerry Mullis has always said PCR shouldn't be used quantitatively, right? Yeah. But there is a kind of a logic in the sense of saying, well, if there is a viral infection, assuming that there is, if you get it right away with a few cycles, then it means that it's hot, as you say, that the virus is actually active. But if you get it with 35 or 40 or 50, wherever you find the virus is half dead. Or, again, a wrong statement, because viruses are not alive. Although all virologists insist that viruses are alive, viruses are only nanoparticles of RNA and protein. There's no life in viruses, right? And that's why the whole question of viruses is very problematic and controversial. And then finally, so anyway, having said that, I found a document from the organization called FIND, which is the most important international organization for evaluation of diagnostic tools, right? And so they published about their evaluation of about 35 tests, the most common 35 COVID PCR tests, right? And then when you go and look for the cycles, there's only 2 or 3 that are below 35. All the rest are 37, 38 as an average, 40 as an average, which means, maybe you have some that are 35, but you have some that are 45, right? And so this is the situation. On the one hand, health authorities have always said above 30, 35 doesn't mean anything. On the other hand, they accept all these tests at 40, 45, 50. I have another document, a letter, an answer from a lab that was contacted by someone I know, asking for how they do the test, and they told them that they do regularly 50 cycles. So it's written in this document. That's their standard, 50 cycles.
So at the heart of your court case are the PCR tests.
Well, all the things I said, meaning the non-isolation of virus, the fact that these devices are, we don't even know what's inside and they haven't been validated or evaluated. The fact that the virus mutates and therefore you cannot tell me that, some test that has been prepared months ago, it's still valid today. And then the PCR test. And finally, the last thing, which is this document from the Istituto Superiore di Sanità, which from their own data confirms that the false positive are from 50 to 91%. And how does this come up? Mm-hmm. This comes up because they said...
Who confirms this?
The National Institute of Health of Italy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Can you send us this document?
Yeah, I'll send you the document. The problem is they don't say that clearly. You just have to derive it from their data. It's there, right? But I'll send you this because I translated it into English.
That's important.
What they say essentially is this. They say, there's 3 parameters that need to be used to evaluate the validity of a PCR test. One is the sensibility, that is the ability of getting as much nuclear RNA, viral RNA as possible. The specificity, meaning to close down into whatever you're looking for in a more specific way. But even when you have these 2 parameters at the top level, meaning which are not, of course, because there's no specificity, but they claim they have 90%, 100% specificity, right? Even by putting 90%, 100% specificity and sensibility, the third element is prevalence, meaning the spread of the virus in the population. Now, of course, and they report 4 possible cases at 2%, at 5%, at 10%, and 30%, right? Now, the current spread of the virus, as verifiable from the data we have, without conjectures in Italy, is 0.1%. So essentially, is not even foreseen by those who make this calculation because it's 20 times less than the 2% minimum, right? But from the National Institute of Health of Italy document, it comes out that at 2%, even the best, the best device, the best PCR test, produces inevitably 51% false positive. The worst, which is probably the more likely given that no one has been validated or validated, produces 91% false positives. And this is in the official document of the National Institute of Health.
I'm going to have to translate this. Also, die Klage, you brought this complaint, you filed this complaint.
Yeah, we filed the complaint I don't know, maybe now by 30, 40 courts. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Can you send us a copy of that too?
Yeah, I actually, I have it translated in English, so I can send you.
Perfect. So let me just quickly translate this. Also, Professor Scoglio und seine Leute haben in 30 verschiedenen Gerichten, 30 hat er eben gesagt, ne? 30 verschiedenen Gerichten, 40, diese Klagen anhängig gemacht. Die drehen sich um den PCR-Test. Und die argumentieren damit, dass erstens keine vernünftige Virusisolation stattgefunden hat. Weiterhin damit, dass hier eine ungeheure Mutation in der Zwischenzeit stattgefunden hat, sodass kein Mensch mehr weiß, ob das, worauf man hier jetzt gerade testet, noch irgendwas mit dem ursprünglichen Wuhan zu tun hat. Und weiterhin natürlich der PCR-Test und dessen Ungenauigkeit. Und da weist er gerade darauf hin, dass sogar nach ich nehme an, das ist das Gesundheitsministerium oder die Gesundheitsbehörde, der italienischen Gesundheitsbehörde, hier, wenn dieser Test angewendet wird, da spielen ja 3 Dinge eine Rolle: Sensitivität, Spezifität und Prävalenz. Und dann sagt er, die Prävalenz, also die Verbreitung des, was auch immer das ist, Virus, beträgt im Moment 0,01%. So habe ich es aufgeschrieben. Prevalence is 0.01?
Yeah, the actual one, I forget to say that since prevalence is actually also hypothetical, meaning they make hypotheses, you know. You could actually raise it 10 times, it would still be 1%. You could raise it 20 times, say, oh, there's 20 times more people infected than they actually registered, the ones actually registered. But even at 20 times more, you're still at 2%, and you still have 50 to 91% false positives.
Also das ist ganz wichtig, sagt er. Die Prävalenz, die echte Prävalenz beträgt 0,01%. Und selbst wenn man das verzehnfachen oder verzwanzigfachen würde, dann würde man bei 2% landen. Und da sagt sogar die nationale Gesundheitsbehörde, wenn wir da bei einer Prävalenz von 2% testen, dann sind die besten PCR-Tests, haben immer noch 51% False Positives und die schlechtesten 91%. Und das passt wieder zu der Einschätzung von Jeden, der sagt, that matches what Dr. Jeden says. He says at least 94% are false positives, probably more. Dr. Wodarg, was würden Sie da irgendwas nachfragen wollen oder ergänzen oder verbessern wollen?
Ja, ich hätte noch einen Hinweis. Die Situation in Deutschland, die ist ja durchaus vergleichbar. Wir haben ja sehr schöne Sentinels. Wir haben ja im Robert-Koch-Institut 3 verschiedene Sentinels. Das eine ist das Grippe-Web. Da werden Menschen befragt, die sich freiwillig melden. Das sind Patienten oder es sind aus der Bevölkerung Menschen, die werden nach Symptomen gefragt. Dann gibt es die Arbeitsgemeinschaft Influenza. Da werden gesammelt aus über 600 Sentinel-Praxen in ganz Deutschland werden also Leute gemeldet, die wegen Atemwegserkrankung, akuter Atemwegserkrankung in die Sprechstunde kamen. Das heißt, da kann man sehen, gibt es überhaupt Erkältungs- oder Atemwegserkrankungen, gibt es Grippe oder gibt es keine, Leute, die zum Arzt gehen. Die werden da gemeldet. Und da werden auch dann Proben eingeschickt, dann Labore, wo dann die Viren untersucht werden, die dort besonders häufig vorkommen. Bei diesen Ergebnissen, die werden jede Woche veröffentlicht und da sind in den letzten Wochen jetzt hauptsächlich Rhinoviren gefunden worden. Das sind die normalen Erkältungsviren und diese Rhinoviren, die haben also auch dazu geführt, dass die Leute in die Arztpraxis gingen. Die Leute hatten also Beschwerden mit diesen Rhinoviren, deshalb sind sie ja hingegangen und die sind da gefunden worden. Es sind keine SARS-CoV-2-Viren gefunden worden, obwohl die mit untersucht werden. Keine einzige. Das heißt, es sind noch einige andere, es sind, glaube ich, Influenza noch gefunden worden, ein paar, aber auch nicht viele. Also da ist im Moment nicht viel los gewesen. Und es sind sehr wenig Leute zum Arzt gegangen. Es sind viel weniger Proben eingeschickt worden, als sonst eingeschickt werden. Und das heißt, da ist die Frage, also wenn da eine Epidemie unterwegs wäre, dann würden erstmal mehr zum Arzt gehen, dann wäre da mehr los. Und wenn es eine Epidemie wäre, die was mit Covid-19 zu tun hat, dann müsste man ja zumindest bei einzelnen dieser Patienten auch mal im Sentinel dann die entsprechenden Viren finden. Das hat man nicht. Von daher ist dieser Lockdown, den wir jetzt haben, beruht in keiner Weise auf irgendwelchen nachvollziehbaren und auch mit geeigneten Instrumenten erhobenen Daten. Das Einzige, was gemacht wird, es wird wie wild getestet. Der Test hat einen Fehler, das haben wir ja eben gehört. Und wenn mehr getestet wird, dann wird auch der Fehler deutlicher. Wenn man das Radio lauter aufdreht, wird das Rauschen größer. Nicht nur die Musik, sondern auch das Rauschen. Genau das hören wir jetzt bei den Tests. Und das sehen wir bei den Tests mehr nicht. Und das passt ja auch dazu, dass die Zahlen der Krankenhauseinweisungen sich nicht wesentlich unterscheiden, was jedes Jahr passiert. Natürlich werden die im Winter mehr. Das haben wir aber jeden Winter. Und da ist also nichts Besonderes zu sehen.
Professor Scoglio, I will quickly translate this for you. Dr. Wodarg just mentioned that we have here in Germany, we have a sentinel system, meaning there are a number of doctors throughout the country who watch out for certain diseases. Is there a flu wave coming? Is there another kind of illness coming? And even though we do have a few more people who go to see their doctor because they feel sick because of a cold or something, thus far, no coronavirus has been found. No coronavirus has been found, but only what usually is found during this time of the year. It's either the common cold or it's the flu. It's rhinoviruses. Rhinoviruses and nothing much else. This matches what you're saying. We do have a pandemic, but it's only PCR test pandemic.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, and essentially, it's what I say is the new pathology of asymptomaticity. They've turned asymptomatics, meaning people responding positive to the test, and they turn it into sick people. Yeah. Now we have TV calling, 30 new sick people, only be 30,000 new sick people in Italy today or whatever, and only because they tested positive to a test that is completely meaningless. Yeah. People who are perfectly healthy, So, the same thing.
Lass uns das gerade nochmal übersetzen. Das ist eine ganz tolle Aussage. Im Prinzip die neue Pathologie des Asymptomatischseins. Also, dass jemand, der positiv getestet wird und keine Symptome hat, der erscheint plötzlich als der Kranke. Ja, der ist eigentlich quietschfidel und topgesund. Ja, und also, das ist wirklich eine sehr schöne Begrifflichkeit. Wichtiger Hinweis nochmal.
Also ich meine, Professor Hockertz, Sie müssen mich da korrigieren, Herr Dr. Wodarg. Ich meine, Professor Hockertz hat in einem E-Mail-Verkehr, den ich mit ihm hatte, das hast du auch gesehen, habe ich ihn gefragt, kann man sich darauf einigen, dass man sagt, es ist hochstreitig, ob es überhaupt asymptomatische Infektionen gibt, und zweitens, es ist kein Fall bisher nachgewiesen worden, wo jemand ohne Symptome infektiös war. Und dann meine ich, haben wir uns darauf geeinigt. Habe ich das jetzt falsch wiedergegeben, Herr Dr. Wodarg?
Das typische Beispiel dafür ist ja, wenn man jetzt sagt, asymptomatisch oder symptomatische Patienten, das typische Beispiel ist ja dieser Indexfall, der bei Webasto damals auftrat, als das losging. Das war ja Anfang Januar schon. Ende Januar, Verzeihung. Ja. In Bayern. Und da ist es ja so, dass man sagte, da sei eine junge Dame aus China, die sei der Indexfall gewesen, die dann andere angesteckt hätte, und die sei symptomlos gewesen. Und dann stellte sich nachher raus, die hat aber Paracetamol genommen, vorher schon.
Genau, das hatten wir vorhin besprochen.
Und das nimmt man ja nicht einfach, weil es so gut schmeckt, sondern das nimmt man natürlich, weil man Symptome spürt. Ja. Und also selbst dieser Indexfall, der zeigt also, wie schräge das Ganze ist und wie genau man aufpassen muss, wenn man vom Symptomlosen spricht. Ja. Die Medizin insgesamt und in den Lehrbüchern und überall steht es drin, dass eine Infektion macht Symptome. Eine Infektion erkennt man daran, dass sie Symptome macht. Da verändert sich was in den Schleimhäuten, das spüren wir, die Nase geht zu, wir werden heiser oder wir haben also wir merken, da ist irgendwas in Gange. Das ist eine Infektion. Das ist die Reaktion des Körpers auf Krankheitserreger. Weil wir merken nicht die Krankheitserreger, sondern wir merken immer die Reaktion unseres Körpers. Und von daher ist das mit solange der Körper nicht reagiert, solange da, Herr Drosten hat das ja mal wunderhübsch gesagt, dass da ein Virus über die Schleimhaut einer Schwester huscht, so hat er das ausgedrückt. Das hat mit Ansteckungsfähigkeit nichts zu tun. Viren liegen da und Trümmer von Viren liegen überall rum. Und zum Beispiel auf dem Schlachthof, nicht? Wenn da einer der Schlachter da ordentlich arbeitet, da sind Nebel und Dunst. Wir haben das ja bei Tönnies damals gesehen, dieser Schlachtbetrieb, wo mit viel Wasser dann auch Aerosole erzeugt werden. Da sind Viren in den Schlachttieren drin. Und wenn die Schlachter atmen, dann haben sie auch diese Virusreste auf ihrer Schleimhaut. Und möglicherweise reagiert der PCR-Test selbst darauf. Das ist ja damals nicht nachkontrolliert worden. Das haben die ja verweigert, diese Nachuntersuchung, diese Kontrollen. Das hätte man ja sehr schön prüfen können. Und da gibt es also unheimlich viele Fehlermöglichkeiten. Völlig klar, wenn es um eine Seuche geht, also um eine Infektionskrankheit, eine ansteckende Erkrankung, dann ist es so, dass jemand, der angesteckt ist, und der entwickelt dann manchmal Symptome, manchmal nicht. Wenn er keine Symptome entwickelt, dann ist er nach allem, was die Gesundheitsämter und die Amtsärzte gelernt haben und bisher praktiziert haben, ist er auch nicht ansteckungsfähig. Und warum sollte sich das jetzt nur aus Gefälligkeit für weiß nicht wen plötzlich geändert haben, ohne dass da irgendwelche wissenschaftlichen Gründe dafür nennbar sind?
Professor Scoglio, Dr. Wodarg again completely agrees with you. The lie about asymptomatic infections is a lie. It doesn't exist. We've had other professors who told us precisely that, and Dr. Wodarg just repeated this, who told us precisely that the medical textbooks always teach you that a person cannot be infected without showing any symptoms. And even that example which Professor Drosten, or the person who calls himself Professor Drosten, even the example that he mentions in a preprint of January 30th of this year, of a woman from Wuhan who traveled to Frankfurt and then to Bavaria. He mentions her as an example of someone who showed no symptoms but was still infectious, contagious. Turns out not true. A journalist by the name of Kai Kupferschmidt found out that this woman was taking anti-flu medication, was having a sore throat, was suffering from something, so she did have symptoms. Nevertheless, Mr. Drosten published his preprint without correcting himself. So there's a lot of evidence that says there are no asymptomatic infections. We do not have to be afraid of people who are healthy and who don't show any symptoms. And of course, and that's at the core of your lawsuit, the PCR tests are, just like Dr. Jeden says, not capable of telling us anything about infections. They're used only as a tool to induce panic.
Yeah. But on this point, maybe I can add something on this point of asymptomatic, positive asymptomatic.
Yeah.
Even from the point of view of those who accept this approach, as you were saying before, if you don't have enough pathogens in you to generate symptoms, how can you have enough pathogens to infect somebody else?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a basic common sense, right?
Yeah.
If you had enough to infect somebody else, you would have symptoms.
Yeah, that is what Dr. Wodarg pointed out. He says if your body doesn't react to anything, then you can't be sick, because the body does not react to the virus. It reacts when the immune system kicks in and fights against the virus, and that's when the symptoms show. Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Let's just turn quickly to see if we have someone from Holland here. Let's see if.
But in the meantime, let me add something. Professor Scoglio, last night, Viviane Fischer and I announced that we can now make it public that we have a transatlantic alliance between us, the Corona Committee, and its lawyers, its team of lawyers on the one hand, and Bobby Kennedy and his Children's Health Defense on the other side of the Atlantic. And we would very much, and I think I haven't spoken with Bobby Kennedy yet, but I will, we would very much like to include you in this international alliance, if that's okay with you.
I would be very happy, yes, absolutely.
Excellent, great.
Yes.
Could I add something for the professor?
Yes.
Yeah.
You were talking about your lawsuit against the state for a PCR test. I just posted in the chat the indictment we just put in front of the court today. This is also about a PCR test, and you mentioned about the CE certification. In our case, the first thing is which we put forward is the CE certification, because every test which is on the market right now has only that's research use only, limited. So it means it cannot be used for diagnostic purposes. And if you read how do you say, the producers, one second, let me look like this. You can find it in the document I sent you. It says, literally, a positive test does not mean that the person is carrying the virus. It can only be seen as an indication for further investigation. The test can never be used as a base for a clinical diagnosis, and it should only be used by trained professionals and under laboratorial circumstances, and it doesn't exclude other pathogens, which can also be the reason for a positive result. And a negative test doesn't mean that the person is not carrying the virus. This is what the producers are saying in their restrictions on the use. So we put that all in our indictment and for the court. Please find it there, download it, so maybe it can be to use also for you in Italy.
Yeah, if you actually want to send it to me, that'd be interesting.
It is sent. You have it now in your. You have it in the chat. If you open the chat,
all right,
you can download it.
Yeah, but that's what even the CDC says so. We have a number of publications. This one, the one I'm quoting from, is I think from July of this year. July 13th on page 38, they say detection of viral RNA may not indicate the presence of infectious virus or that 2019 nCoV is the causative agent for clinical symptoms. And it also says this test cannot rule out diseases caused by other bacterial or viral pathogens. So they all know, but they don't tell us.
Ja, das ist
Not only they know.
Ganz kurz übersetzen, also es ist ein ganz wichtiger Punkt. Wir haben jetzt auch Jeroen aus Holland bei uns, der auch gerade eine Klage eingereicht hat in Bezug auf also mit der Begründung, dass der PCR-Test eben nichts taugt. Und er weist auch nochmal darauf hin, dass die ja dieses Research Only, also nur für quasi Forschungszwecke, dieses Label haben. Und da steht in den näheren Beschreibungen, genau wie auch bei der CDC selbst auf der Seite, steht drauf, dass das eben bedeutet, dass da kein ganz klarer, also kein Nachweis eines lebendigen Virusgeschehens damit möglich ist. Und es ist auch nicht nachgewiesen, dass, wenn man etwas findet, dass das tatsächlich die Ursache ist für die möglicherweise festzustellende Krankheit.
Sondern es kann auch irgendwas anderes sein, zum Beispiel die Common Cold oder die Flu. Ne?
Genau.
Okay.
Ja, also ganz wichtiger Punkt.
Well, we collected 27 user guidances from different producers. So there are in total in Europe at this moment, I think there are over 80 have been admitted for the CE registration, but only the research only. But all of them have the same description. So we have 27 for the court as an example. We can even produce 80. Everyone is the same. It's not for diagnostic purposes.
Yeah, and we have to stress over and over again, even those tests that have been admitted only got the CE certificate. And they're still not admitted for diagnostic purposes, just like Carrie Mullis kept pointing out over and over and over again. Also nochmal ganz klar zu sagen, die Tests, die hier zugelassen sind, die haben nur den CE-Stempel, so wie Professor Scoglio sagte, die signalisieren nur, dass sie einem nicht in der Hand explodieren, wenn man sie benutzt, aber sie sagen nichts darüber aus, dass sie in irgendeiner Weise für diagnostische Zwecke geeignet sind. Im Gegenteil, dafür sind sie bisher nirgends zugelassen worden. Und nochmal, Carrie Mullis hat das hunderte von Malen gesagt, darauf hingewiesen, damit kann man keine Infektionen nachweisen.
Ja, und das bewahrheitet sich jetzt auch in 27 Testkit-Beschreibungen, hat Herr Puls für den Prozess eingeholt von insgesamt 80 und bei diesen 27 durchgängig das gleiche Bild. Also wir haben es mit einem überhaupt null validierten Geschehen hier zu tun. Also es ist schon faszinierend. Herr Puls, Mr. Puls, so what is the situation in Holland now?
Ich kann auch in Deutsch. Was wollt ihr? Englisch
Deutsch?
oder Deutsch?
Ist egal. Ich weiß nicht, ob Professor Scoglio sonst auch
Professor Scoglio, if there's anything else...
I think you have my email. I think I have your email, so I will send you the translation of the lawsuit.
Yeah, and I will forward it, if you don't mind, in our new network. I will forward it to Bobby Kennedy's
yes, absolutely.
Brilliant legal team.
And you also the document from the Istituto Superiore di Sanità, all that document that I made on that as well.
Excellent. Okay? We'll do that.
Great. That was a very good discussion. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. It was an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.